And that's the 4th time that seagull there has winked at me since the start of the programme, and that can only mean one thing. It's time for Stories from the Stern. This week we present to you the wonderful tale, Pedro Packs a Lunch. Are you ready, Julia?
Ready, Anna. Not only am I at the stern, but I'm also looking very stern.
Oh, Julia, just read the story.
Pedro was a small boy, but unlike most small boys, Pedro lived in Spain. One day, Pedro decided to go for a walk. He put on his shoes, packed a lunch, and brushed his teeth. Full of anticipation, Pedro opened his front door. Putting his first foot forward, slowly followed by his second foot, Pedro stepped outside. Instantly, Pedro could tell that something just wasn't right. His trousers were soaking wet, and he was having difficulty breathing. What Pedro had forgotten on this particular morning was that he in fact lived in a houseboat, and had done so for his entire life. Pedro had plunged feet first into icy cold water. He was going to have to think quickly if he was to make it out of this one alive. Luckily for Pedro, at this exact moment a prawn trawler just happened to be passing by. Pedro was scooped up in its net and landed safely on the boat's deck. Phew! Pedro could breathe again. This had been a traumatic experience, and one which Pedro hoped he would soon forget. However, it hadn't been all bad. Yes, that's right. During his time in the prawn net, Pedro had made a friend.
Prawns!
Pedro had shouted in surprise as he was being scooped up. After all, this was hardly what Pedro had anticipated when he'd been brushing his teeth earlier that morning.
Why did you roll that R just now?
Asked the prawns, politely but firmly.
Because I'm freezing!
Exclaimed Pedro.
This water is icy cold!
In an uncharacteristic moment of selflessness, the prawns huddled around Pedro, creating a thick coat which would inevitably leave him feeling toasty warm, and most of all, loved. Pedro felt eternally grateful towards the prawns, and he didn't hesitate in saying so.
I feel eternally grateful to you, prawns!
They exchanged contact details, swearing they would one day meet again. To show his gratitude, Pedro gave the prawns his packed lunch. He even gave them his salt and vinegar crisps, which had been Pedro's favourite of all crisps since an early age. Later that evening, as Pedro bounded flamboyantly down the path that led to his front door, the events of the day ran through his mind like a train in the night. Had this really happened? Would Pedro ever see those prawns again? These were questions Pedro knew he may never be able to answer. One thing Pedro could be certain of was that all the events which had occurred earlier this day had been real, and that one day he would meet those selfless prawns again.
Oh look, Matthew's found some food.
Great story, guys.
What's that you're eating, Matthew?
Pigeon.
That's not pigeon, Matthew.
That's not pigeon at all.
That's not pigeon one bit.
Not one bit of pigeon is to be found right there.
That's not even slightly pigeon.
Pigeons? I see none.
If that was a pigeon, that wouldn't be it.
I've seen many pigeons in my lifetime, and that surely isn't one of them.
Well, strike me down with a pigeon if that's a pigeon.
Well, what is it then?
That's a swan. He's eating swan. My lord, that swan is the property of the queen. And he's committing treason by eating that swan.
Easy, lads, I'm almost done.
I'm sorry, son, but now the wicked deed's been done, and I shall have to make an example of your anti-monarchical behaviour. You there, sailor, throw this peasant boy into the sea.
But he can't even swim.
Oh, don't worry about that. We docked. They just threw him onto the concrete.
No! He wasn't perfect, I know, but I'm still sad to see him go. Matthew, I miss you so. He wasn't the type of guy who I would ever lend a fiver, and his hygiene left something to be desired. He wasn't perfect, I know, but I'm still sad he had to go. Matthew, I miss you So...
Oh, come on now, Julia, don't be too sad. There's plenty more peas in the sea.
Matthew loved peas!
Oh, God, come on. Look, here's something that'll cheer you up.
Oh, you're right. I feel loads better. I love harmonicas.
Ah, you see, I knew you would.
How are you playing the harmonica and talking at the same time?
Oh, never mind that.
Oh. Do you want some pigeon? It was pigeon after all.
I'm not too fond of poultry, actually.
The credits for today's episode will be brought to you by myself and the Cockney hag who played Pedro in the story.
Two Coal for Monsieur was written and performed by Anna Corey and Julia Fernwannon.
It was made hilarious by William Bradshaw, Adam Todd, Phil O'Shea and Matthew Howard.
Saturday night. One of other three Hail Marys.
Stop it.
Sorry.